Hi, Mark here with the third of the Draken Games YouTube channel videos, and this one is about my first ever wargame, which is a hex-and-counter wargame called Vectis. It's set in the Napoleonic Era, which I think is my favourite period for wargaming, and it's a fictional battle. This battle never happened. It's an alternative history, I guess. The inspiration for it was, well, partly I know the Isle of Wight quite well, which is where the battle is set. I used to go there holidays as a kid, and I worked there later in life. And secondly, a sort of a what if question: what if the Royal Navy hadn't had supremacy over the seas that it had during the Napoleonic Wars? What if they'd lost Trafalgar? And what if the French Navy could actually mount a small-scale invasion of Britain? I thought it would be a possibility in those circumstances that the French might try a small invasion of the Isle of Wight, because it's a small island, harder for the British to get reinforcements to it, and it might serve, if the campaign was successful, as a launch pad for a full invasion of Britain later on. So anyway, that was the flimsy rationale behind making this game. Basically, because I thought it seemed a fun idea, really. There's a cover. Vectis is the fancy Latin name for the Isle of Wight. And this is the third edition I'll be talking about. The first edition came out in 2007. The two later editions basically just improved the artwork. There's no real difference between the rules. I'm going to talk about the third edition. Well, for those of you who don't know the island, let's have a quick bit of scene setting. So there it is, on this map of most of Great Britain. It's that little red dot down there, right hanging off the south coast there. As you can see in larger scale, here it is. It's about 22 miles east to west and 13 miles north to south. Very symmetrical, as you can see. It's actually aligned exactly north to south and east to west. Cut off from the mainland by a branch of the English Channel called the Solent. So up here you've got some large cities. You've got Southampton and Portsmouth. It's divided across east-west by a range of hills called downs. There's further downs along the southern coast there, just inland from the southern coast, divided north to south by the valley of the River Medina, which, for its later part of its route, is a flooded valley and is tidal. So there's a number of flooded river valleys on the north coast of the island. These downs and these rivers will feature in the rules, as you would expect. It's not such a far-fetched scenario, because the Isle of Wight was raided frequently by the French in the Middle Ages. And there always was a castle quite central, around about there-ish, called Carisbrooke. But of course, it was central, and quite often the raiders were able to attack the coast and get away before the defences could do anything about it. Not always. There was a couple of notable successes against the French raiders, but generally it became quite difficult to make a living at the island, with it being under threat from French raiders, and the island depopulated during the Middle Ages, to the point where Henry VIII had to invest in a lot more coastal defences. So he built castles at Yarmouth, at Sandown, and other places too, and made the island more defensible. So it's not out of the question that if the French could get a force across the Channel, that they would try and attack the Isle of Wight. Okay then, let's have a look at the contents. That's the contents, that's what you get. A little bit of background, which is basically what I've been talking about now, and then description of the units, the terrain, the effect the terrain has on the units, on movement, the effect that fortifications have, what the starting dispositions, easy for me to say, what the starting dispositions are, and of course how you actually play the game. The game's split into 12 turns. Each turn represents like a third of a waking day, so there's 3 turns to a day, and it's a 4-day campaign effectively, and each turn is split into smaller phases, and the rules go through how you play through a phase and a turn, and at the end of the 12th turn you tot up the victory points and see who's won. Pretty standard. Quite straightforward rules. This is quite a large scale battle. It's really a core level encounter, so you're not looking at tactical stuff here. You're not looking at getting units into line, into column, into square. It's much more strategic than that. You're basically just moving large units, regiment / battalion level, whatever you want to define those as, units around quite a large area. So that's the basics. That's what you get for the basics. So let's have a look at the game map. There we go. So as you can see, we've got the island here turned into a hex-and-counter version of it. You've got two-tone sort of tan and brown to show the hilly areas. You've got rivers which generally flow between hexes. You've got the flooded estuaries here, which are no-go. Units can't go into those at all. You've got towns and settlements, Shorewell down there. You've got fortifications, you've got Sandown Fort there, you've got Yarmouth Castle there, you've got Carisbrooke Castle there, you've got Woodland, these are the green dots there. The landing areas are shown by yellow, so you've got a landing area at Sandown Bay and also at Brading Haven. Now, if you look at a map of the Isle of Wight nowadays, you can just see actually Brading Haven there. That's a modern view of it. As you can see, it doesn't go very far inland. It went a good 2 or so miles further inland, actually to the town of Brading, which it doesn't go near anymore. Back in the Napoleonic time, the land's been reclaimed since. So this is right for the Napoleonic time. It's not right for how the island is now. Some of these features have been chosen really to simplify gameplay. So there's no unique feature called the Eastern Downs. There's no feature called the Western Downs. There are a number of separate downs which I've just lumped all together. Ditto with the Southern Downs. The same goes for some of the woods. Some of these woods are actually Quar wood, and the Firestone woods are actually collections of coppices that I've just merged together. Similarly, there are more settlements in this. I've picked out settlements which are the major settlements, certainly like Newport and East and West Cowes. You couldn't avoid those. But some of these settlements are very small. I've just not put all the small settlements on. I've put in a few just to represent settlements in the southern part of the island. The undercliff here is this strip of land between the Southern Downs, what I've called the Southern Downs, and the coast. There are some routes up over these downs, but I've probably made this a little bit too easy. I think progress should be harder. I probably should have made that solid downs. So apologies if you know the Isle of Wight and you think that's wrong. It doesn't really affect the game, and as I'd been through some extensive playtesting, by the time I decided that, I thought I'll just leave it as it is. But yeah, really, it should be harder to get up from the undercliff inland than that than the map actually allows you to. Okay, so that's the map overall. It comes in 4 A4 sheets, so you put those all together and it makes pretty much an A2 map, I suppose. You can see where the reinforcement areas are. So this is where the reinforcements, well, actually the invasion from the French comes. Smattering of Marines are able to get ashore to reinforce the British, but that's all. Let's look at one of the quadrants of the map in a bit more detail then. So here you've got the southeast quadrant, which is where the game actually starts. Here we see it. And you can see there's the starting positions of the French. They start on these invasion boxes here, and each wave invades at certain times. The French land throughout the first day and on the morning of the second day, so up to about turn 4. You've got infantry waves, you've got cavalry waves. Further north, you've got artillery can be put ashore as well. And you can see a little bit more detail here. You can see what the towns look like. And all these terrains have different impacts on the units that are operating on them, which the rules explain as you'd expect. Okay, let's have a look at some of those units now. I'll move the quadrant out of the way. Okay, line infantry. So this is the standard unit of the battle. Both sides have line infantry. There are just 2 factors really in describing a unit, and that's its movement point allowance, MP, and its break value, 9. Break value, you roll 2d6. If you equal the break value, disorder a unit. If you exceed it, you destroy it, remove it from the board, break it completely. That's it. It's a pretty straightforward game, to be honest. Obviously, there's modifications. The terrain will use up more movement points depending on the terrain you're moving on to, and the sort of terrain you're defending, whether you're defending behind a river, whether you've got a fortification to help you in defense, will help with the break value, or hinder it. You have break value reduced as well. If a unit's not broken outright, it's disordered. And a disordered unit, so there's a disordered example of British line infantry. When it's disordered, a unit effectively is unable to move for the rest of that turn, so it can't instigate melee attacks. And if it's attacked itself, its break value, as you can see, has been reduced by 2. So it's very vulnerable if disordered early in the turn to later attacks. Let's have a look at a different type of unit. It's a full arms battle, this, which I think all the permanent battles should be. There you go, light cavalry. So light cavalry is the quickest unit on the battlefield. It can move with a movement point allowance of 8. It's got a break value of 9. Now, a cavalry, you've got a little asterisk which shows that the break value is reduced if obliged to defend woodland or a town. So cavalry that can't form up and charge, as it should do on horses, is basically deemed to fight as militia. So they've got to dismount, fight in streets, fight in trees, and because of their numbers and the fact they've got to make do with carbines, they'll be pretty ineffective in those circumstances. Also have a look at the third arm artillery. So hopefully you can recognise that as a picture of a gun. It's horse artillery, so it can move reasonably fast. Movement point allowance of 5, but it can only move when it's not being fired. So if you fire that turn, the artillery has to stay stationary. Quite weak, as you'd expect. Break value of 7. Artillery does not destroy units. What artillery does is a successful hit from artillery fire will make that unit become bombarded. That's the phrase I use in the rules. And a bombarded unit is effectively like a disordered unit. It can't move, and its break point allowance is reduced to by 2. So whilst artillery can't destroy a unit by itself, it can make it much more vulnerable to another unit, cavalry or infantry, following up the artillery bombardment with an attack and probably destroying that unit. There's only one unit that is unique to one side or the other, and that is militia. So because the British are defending the Isle of Wight, they'll have part-time soldiers who are tasked with that. As you might expect, militia are quite a weak unit, so only a break value of 7. I'm figuring they'll probably fight in looser order, and they know the land, it's their home territory, so the movement point allowance is a little bit increased. The movement point allowance of 4, but very weak. Break value of 7. The French obviously have their own units. I'm not going to show every single unit that's available. That'd be quite tedious. But there we have French Guard Infantry. British have Guard Infantry 2. Movement point allowance of 3. They break on a 10. They also have, as you might expect, heavy cavalry. Everyone wants a heavy cavalry charge in the Napoleonic game. So there's the heavy cavalry. Again, break on 10, but only fights as militia if obliged to fight in woodland or a built-up area. Not as fast as the light cavalry, as you can see, movement point allowance of 6. And finally, both sides also have light infantry. Quite a lot of light infantry in this battle, because I'm figuring that marine reinforcements brought in by the British will effectively fight as light infantry. And also, because it's an invasion, I need to storm ashore, probably with minimal equipment. That really does sound like a light infantry role. So I think the French will have an awful lot of light infantry in this attack. My mate Steve, who was with the territorial light infantry, does not like the fact that the break value is only 8 compared to light infantry. That's really a recognition that these are quite small units in terms of manpower compared to a line infantry battalion. It's no reflection on the fighting abilities of a light infantryman. It's basically saying these are small, light units, and therefore they can't really trade firepower with line infantry on an even footing. But they are quite fast. They've got movement point allowance of 4, so they're more rapid. Okay, so those are the units. There are 24 defending British units and 30 invading French units. So the French have advantage in numbers, also a bit of an advantage in quality because 3 of the defending units are militia, which are quite weak, as we've seen, and the French have no militia. So basically the French have got slightly better quality forces overall, and certainly more numbers, considerably more numbers. So it really becomes about what the British can do to halt that invasion, deny them some of the objectives thereafter. The objectives thereafter are the defences and the towns. Get enough objectives, French win. They're denied enough objectives, the British win. Okay, so I'll have a quick look at the tracking table now. That just shows you the sequence of the 12 turns, and that allows you to track the progress of the battle, provide you little counters which you can move down these so you don't lose where you are in the sequence. And basically you progress through these 12 turns, get to the end of the 12th turn, you tot up the victory conditions and see who's won. Okay, so that's a brief introduction to the game. It's available from wargamedownloads.com and also from wargamevault.com, and that's for $4.95 as a download. The second edition, not the third edition, so the second edition, which it's got slightly more basic artwork, that's available from lulu.com. That's priced in pounds, so I'll not give you that price because that varies. You can also buy a hard copy book version of the game from lulu.com. Again, I'll not give you the price because that's going to vary a little bit, and also the posting packing will vary according to where in the world you are. But if you follow the link to my Lulu storefront, which I'll give in the description down below, you'll be able to go and explore that and see what the prices are. Okay, so that's the introduction to Vectis. My next video is actually going to be a description of a playthrough of the game, so that'll give you a really good feel for how a typical battle goes, and maybe show you some of the range of the tactical and strategic options that you've got as a player. Right, thank you very much. Hope you like this, and I'll follow this up in the next week or so with my description of a playthrough of this game. Thanks then, bye.